The desert night erupted in fire and twisted metal as something streaked across the star-scattered sky, its burning trajectory ending in Kai Thorne's sprawling scrapyard with a thunderous crash that shook his workshop windows. The ex-military mechanic paused, wrench suspended over the engine he'd been rebuilding, listening to the echo fade into the wasteland silence. Kai had chosen this remote corner of Nevada precisely because nothing ever happened here. 3 years since his discharge, 3 years of blessed solitude among rusted car frames and salvaged electronics, fixing things instead of breaking them. The last thing he wanted was excitement, but something about that crash pulled at him with inexplicable urgency. Grabbing his flashlight and sidearm, old habits die hard, Kai navigated through the maze of stacked metal toward the impact site. The smell hit him first, ozone and something else, something that made his skin prickle with static electricity. Then he saw it. The craft was unlike anything from Earth's aerospace programs. Its hull gleamed with an iridescent sheen that seemed to shift colors in his flashlight beam. Though sections had been torn away, revealing complex crystalline structures within, steam hissed from ruptured conduits and strange symbols flickered weakly along what might have been a control panel. A sound stopped him cold, a soft whimper, unmistakably human. Inside the wreckage, nestled in what appeared to be some kind of protective cocoon, lay an infant. She couldn't have been more than a few months old, with delicate features and skin that seemed to shimmer faintly in the darkness. 2 arms, 2 legs, perfectly human in every visible way except for her eyes. They held an intelligence too ancient for such a young face. "What the hell?" Kai breathed, reaching out instinctively as the child's cries grew stronger. The moment his calloused fingers touched her, the crying stopped. She looked up at him with those impossible eyes, and something shifted in Kai's chest. A protective instinct he thought had died with his squad in Kandahar. Behind him, the craft shuddered and began to collapse inward with a sound like breaking glass. Without thinking, Kai scooped up the infant and ran, reaching safety just as the entire structure imploded into a pile of unidentifiable debris. In his workshop, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Kai examined his unexpected charge more carefully. She appeared completely human now, her skin no longer shimmering, her eyes a normal blue-gray. If not for the impossible craft, he might have convinced himself she was simply an abandoned baby. But the craft had been real. And something deep in his gut told him this child was far more than she appeared. "Vera," he said suddenly, surprising himself. The name just felt right. "Guess you're stuck with me, kid." Over the following days, as Kai awkwardly learned to change diapers and warm bottles, he made 2 decisions that would define their future. First, he would raise this child as his own, teaching her everything he knew about survival in a harsh world. Second, he would never speak of the crash to anyone. The desert had given him a daughter born of stars. Now he would raise her with steel in her spine and fire in her heart, preparing her for whatever destiny had brought her to his door. Little did he know that destiny was already watching, waiting for the lost heir to reveal herself. 16 years had transformed the mysterious infant into a remarkable young woman. Vera Thorne moved through the scrapyard with fluid grace, her hands finding the perfect salvage piece without conscious thought, as if the metal called to her. Kai watched from his workshop doorway, pride and worry warring in his chest. "Dad, the alternator from that '89 Mustang, it's not actually broken," Vera called out, her voice carrying easily across the yard. "The copper wiring just needs realignment." Kai shook his head in amazement. She'd developed an uncanny ability to diagnose mechanical problems at a glance, often seeing solutions that escaped even his trained eye. That wasn't the only change. Sometimes he caught her staring at the stars with an expression of profound longing, and lately, she'd been having vivid dreams she couldn't quite remember upon waking. The rumble of an approaching motorcycle broke his reverie. Jackson Rivera pulled up in a cloud of dust, his dark hair tousled by the desert wind. The local pilot had been making increasingly frequent visits to their isolated home, ostensibly for parts, but clearly more interested in Vera. "Hey, beautiful," Jackson called out, dismounting with easy confidence. "Find anything interesting today?" Vera's cheeks flushed as she emerged from behind a stack of engine blocks, unconsciously smoothing her oil-stained coveralls. "Just this," she said, holding up a pristine circuit board. "From that new wreckage that came in yesterday." As Jackson examined the component, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt through Vera. Not just the flutter of teenage attraction, but something deeper. For a moment she saw flashes of images, vast ships moving through space, a city of crystal spires crumbling under attack, and always, a voice calling her name in a language she didn't recognize. "You okay?" Jackson's concerned voice pulled her back to the present. "Just tired," she lied, but the worried look in his amber eyes told her he wasn't convinced. That evening, as they shared dinner in the small trailer that had been their home for 16 years, Kai noticed Vera pushing food around her plate absently. "The Rivera boy again?" he asked gently. Vera looked up, startled. "It's not just Jackson. I've been having these episodes. Visions, I guess. They feel so real, Dad. Like memories of places I've never been." Kai's fork clattered against his plate. He'd dreaded this conversation for years, hoping against hope that Vera's origins would remain dormant. What kind of places? Cities made of light. Battles in space. And there's always this feeling that I'm supposed to be somewhere else, doing something important. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not really human at all." The words hung between them like a physical presence. Kai reached across the table and took her hand, the same hand he'd first touched 16 years ago in that impossible craft. "You're my daughter," he said firmly. "That's all that matters." But even as he spoke the words, they both knew change was coming. Later that night, Vera met Jackson at their secret spot, a hill overlooking the vast desert where they could see the stars without the scrapyard's lights interfering. They lay on an old blanket, her head on his shoulder, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "Tell me about flying," she murmured, needing the distraction from her churning thoughts. "It's freedom," Jackson said, his voice warm with passion. "Up there, nothing can touch you. It's just you and the sky and endless possibilities." Vera closed, her eyes imagining herself soaring through space instead of just sky. The vision came unbidden, herself at the helm of a ship unlike anything on Earth, stars streaming past like tears of light. "Vera?" Jackson's voice was concerned. "Your eyes. They're glowing." She sat up quickly, the vision shattering. In the reflection of his frightened gaze, she saw that her eyes had indeed taken on an otherworldly luminescence. "I should go," she whispered, but Jackson caught her hand. "Whatever this is, whatever you are, I don't care. I love you." The simple declaration broke something loose in her chest. She kissed him then, pouring all her confusion and longing into the contact. For a moment, she felt truly human, truly grounded. But in the distance, something moved against the stars. Ships descending through the atmosphere with predatory grace. The hunt had begun. The first sign of danger came at dawn, a subtle wrongness in the morning light that made Vera's skin crawl with premonition. She stood in the scrapyard, wrench in hand, watching shadows that seemed to move independently of their objects. "Dad?" she called, but Kai was already emerging from the workshop, his old military instincts flaring to life. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded troops. Now. But it was too late. The sky above them shimmered like heat waves, and 3 sleek vessels materialized from apparent nothingness, their hulls a predatory black that seemed to absorb light itself. They settled around the scrapyard with barely a whisper of displaced air. Figures emerged from the craft, tall, elegant beings in form-fitting armor that shifted color like oil on water. Their faces were humanoid but wrong somehow. Too perfect, too symmetrical. When they moved, they did so with liquid grace that made Vera's stomach clench with recognition. "The lost heir reveals herself at last," spoke their leader, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Vera's bones. "We have searched many worlds for you, daughter of the Void Throne." "I don't know what you're talking about," Vera said. But even as the words left her lips, power surged through her body. The metal around the scrapyard began to hum in response, vibrating at frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. Your blood sings the old songs, the hunter continued, stepping closer despite the increasingly violent resonance from the scrap metal. You are Kestra Vex Allen, heir to the Astral Empire, and you will come with us. Like hell she will. Jackson appeared at the edge of the yard, his motorcycle still running. In his hands was one of Kai's modified plasma rifles, crude by alien standards but deadly nonetheless. The lead hunter's laugh was like breaking crystal. The human boy thinks to challenge us? Amusing. That was when Vera's power exploded outward. Every piece of metal in the scrapyard, cars, engines, structural beams, rose into the air as if gravity had simply ceased to exist. They hung there for a moment, trembling with potential energy, before reshaping themselves into weapons of impossible complexity. Vera stood at the center of it all, her eyes blazing with stellar fire, her hair whipping in winds that existed in dimensions beyond the physical. You want me? She snarled, her voice carrying the authority of worlds. Come and take me. The battle that followed lasted only minutes but felt like hours. The hunters moved with inhuman speed, their weapons carving lines of searing energy through the air. But Vera was faster, her newfound abilities allowing her to reshape reality itself on a small scale. Metal flowed like water at her command, forming shields, weapons, even rudimentary armor around her friends. When the dust settled, 2 of the 3 craft lay in smoking ruins. The surviving hunter stood bloodied but unbowed, his perfect features marred by something that might have been respect. You fight with the fury of your ancestors, he said. But this is merely the vanguard. The hegemony will send others. Many others. Then let them come, Vera replied, though her voice shook with exhaustion and the magnitude of what she'd just unleashed. The hunter smiled, a cold, predatory expression. Oh, they will. And when they do, everything you care about will burn. With that, he activated some kind of device and vanished in a pillar of light, leaving behind only the acrid smell of ozone and burning metal. In the aftermath, as Kai and Jackson stared at the devastation surrounding them, Vera sank to her knees. The power that had filled her moments before felt like a living thing, coiled in her chest and demanding release. Kestra Vex Allen, she whispered, testing the foreign name on her tongue. It felt right in a way that terrified her. That's not who you are, Kai said firmly, kneeling beside her. You're Vera Thorne. You're my daughter. But even as he spoke, they all knew that the girl who had lived quietly in the scrapyard was gone forever. In her place stood something far more dangerous and far more necessary. We have to run, Vera said, looking up at the 2 men who meant everything to her. They'll be back, and next time they won't underestimate us. Jackson shouldered his rifle and walked to her side. Then we run together. Kai nodded grimly, already mentally cataloging the supplies they'd need. Like hell, we're facing this alone. They prepared to abandon the only home Vera had ever known. She felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a mantle made of stars. Somewhere in the galaxy, her people were suffering. And whether she liked it or not, she was their only hope. The lost heir had awakened. Now the real journey would begin. 3 months on the run had taken its toll on all of them. They'd moved constantly, staying in cheap motels and abandoned buildings, always one step ahead of the hunters who seemed to materialize from thin air. Vera had learned to suppress her abilities, keeping them locked down tight, but the effort left her constantly exhausted. Tonight they sheltered in an old mining facility in the Montana Rockies. Kai had rigged early warning systems while Jackson maintained their stolen hovercycle. Vera sat alone on the facility's observation deck, staring up at stars that no longer seemed like distant lights, but like a map to home. Can't sleep again? Jackson's voice was soft as he joined her, wrapping a thermal blanket around both their shoulders. The dreams are getting stronger, she admitted, leaning into his warmth. I see things now. Memories that aren't mine but feel more real than my own childhood. In her mind, she could see the Astral Empire in its glory, crystal cities floating in the void, powered by technologies that turned thought into reality. She saw her birth parents, beings of terrible beauty who had ruled with wisdom and compassion, until the hegemony came with their philosophy of order through subjugation. "Tell me," Jackson said, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her arm. "My real name is Kestra Vex Allen. I was born on a world called Luminara, where the cities floated in clouds of stardust." The words came easier now, as if speaking them made them more real. "My parents died defending our people from something called the hegemony, a collective of species that believes free will is chaos." "Sounds like fascists with better technology," Jackson observed. "Worse. They don't just conquer, they remake entire species in their image, erasing everything that makes them unique." Vera shuddered as the memories pressed closer. "The survivors of my people are scattered across the galaxy, hiding, afraid to use their abilities. They're waiting for someone to unite them. You. Me." The word felt like a weight in her chest. "But I don't know how to be what they need. I'm barely 18, Jax. I learned to fight from car parts and scrap metal. How am I supposed to lead a rebellion?" Instead of answering, Jackson tilted her chin up and kissed her softly. The contact sent warmth cascading through her body, but also something else. A vision of possible futures spinning out like golden threads. In some, she saw herself standing at the helm of a vast fleet, bringing hope to countless worlds. In others, she saw only darkness and the screams of the dying. "Because you're not doing it alone," he whispered against her lips. "You've got us." Their moment was shattered by Kai's urgent voice over the comm system. "Vera, get down here now." They found Kai in the main chamber, his face grim as he gestured to a hollow screen displaying news feeds from around the world. Cities burning, military forces engaged with unknown hostiles, and everywhere the same black ships Vera recognized from her nightmares. "They're not just hunting you anymore," Kai said. "They're making a statement. Submit, or watch your world burn." On the screen, a familiar figure appeared, the hunter who had escaped their first encounter, now standing before the United Nations building in New York. When he spoke, his words carried across every communication channel on Earth simultaneously. "People of Terra, your world harbors a criminal wanted for crimes against the galactic order. Surrender Kestra Vex Allen, and your species will be granted the gift of integration into our collective. Refuse, and face the consequences of harboring chaos." Vera felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, but something deeper. The careful walls she'd built around her power cracked, letting stellar fire leak through. "They're going to destroy Earth because of me," she whispered. "No," Kai said firmly. "They're going to destroy Earth because they're monsters. There's a difference." But even as he spoke, more reports flooded in. Entire city blocks vanishing under energy weapons. Military jets falling from the sky like broken toys. Humanity was fighting back, but against technology centuries ahead of their own, the outcome was inevitable. "I have to stop this," Vera said, power beginning to cascade around her in visible waves. "I have to." "You have to think," Jackson interrupted, grabbing her hands. "This is what they want. You, emotional and reckless, making mistakes they can exploit." A new voice cut through their argument. Calm, authoritative, and speaking in a language that bypassed Vera's ears and resonated directly in her mind. "Kestra Vex Allen, heir to the Void Throne we have been waiting." Three figures materialized in the chamber. Not hunters, but something else entirely. They wore robes that seemed to be cut from space itself, and their faces held the ageless quality of beings who had seen civilizations rise and fall. "The Astral Council," Vera breathed, the knowledge surfacing from inherited memories. "You're supposed to be myths. Myths have power, young heir. As do you, if you can learn to wield it correctly." The lead figure stepped forward, and Vera felt her abilities respond to his presence like iron to a magnet. "The time of hiding is over. Your people cry out for salvation, and the galaxy burns while tyrants remake it in their image. I don't know how. Then we will teach you. But know this, the path you choose now will determine not just the fate of your scattered people, but of every free species in the galaxy. Choose quickly, time grows short. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Through the windows they could see black ships descending through the clouds, their weapons already charging. Vera looked at Kai, the man who had raised her with human strength and stubborn love, then at Jackson, whose faith in her burned brighter than any star. Finally, at the council members, representatives of a heritage she was only beginning to understand. "Teach me," she said, her voice carrying the authority of worlds. "But we do this together, all of us." The lead council member smiled, an expression that held both hope and terrible sadness. "Then let us begin your true education, Kestra Vex Allen. The galaxy awaits its heir." Outside, the hunters closed in, but for the first time since this all began, Vera wasn't afraid. She was ready to become who she was meant to be. The final confrontation came not in the vast emptiness of space, but in the skies above Earth, a world that had become the unlikely battleground for the galaxy's future. Vera stood on the bridge of the Astral Dawn, a ship grown rather than built, its living metal responding to her will like an extension of her own body. Around her, the remnants of her people's fleet moved in perfect formation. Ships that had emerged from hiding across the galaxy when word spread that the heir had finally taken her throne. They were outnumbered 100-1 by the hegemony's forces, but for the first time in decades they fought with hope instead of desperation. "Hegemony fleet is moving into position," reported Thane, her tactical officer, a scarred veteran who had fought in the original war against the Collective. "Admiral Vorkesh commands their flagship personally." Vera nodded, feeling the weight of command settle around her like armor. 3 months of intensive training with the Astral Council had awakened abilities she'd never dreamed possible. But more importantly, it had taught her something Kai had been trying to show her all along. True strength came not from power alone, but from the connections that bind people together. "Signal the Earth Fleet," she ordered. "Tell General Morrison we're ready to begin." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. The hegemony expected her to fight like her parents, with overwhelming force and ancient technology. Instead, she would fight like Kai had taught her, with cunning, improvisation, and the unshakable belief that sometimes the underdog wins. "Vera," Jackson's voice came over the private comm channel. He was piloting one of the human fighters that had been hastily retrofitted with astral technology, a hybrid approach that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. "You ready for this?" "As ready as anyone can be for declaring war on half the year." "Galaxy," she replied, allowing herself a moment of humor despite the circumstances. "Just remember, you're not doing this alone." She smiled, feeling the truth of those words resonate through every fiber of her being. Below them, Earth's defense forces stood ready. Around them, her people's ships hummed with barely contained energy. And somewhere in the void between stars, she could feel the presence of every free species watching, waiting to see if this day would bring liberation or the final death of hope. The hegemony fleet moved like a living thing, their black ships flowing through space in perfect synchronization. At their head rode Admiral Vorkesh's flagship, a kilometer-long nightmare of sharp edges and predatory intent. "They're hailing us," Thane reported, on screen. Admiral Vorkesh appeared in the holographic display, tall, imposing, with the kind of perfect features that the hegemony prized. His eyes held the cold certainty of someone who had never known defeat. "Kestra Vex Allen," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that spoke of absolute authority. "You have caused considerable disruption. Submit now, and your people will be granted a swift integration into our collective. Resist, and watch as everything you care about burns." "Counteroffer," Vera replied, letting stellar fire kindle in her eyes. "You leave this system and every other free world alone, and maybe I'll let some of you live long enough to remember what it was like to choose your own path." Vorkesh's laugh was like breaking glass. "You speak with the arrogance of youth. Your parents made similar threats. Their empire burned all the same." "I'm not my parents," Vera said quietly. "I'm something new." With that, she cut the transmission and opened herself to the vast network of consciousness that connected every ship in her fleet. It was a technique the Council had taught her, a way of linking minds without dominating them, allowing each person to contribute their unique strengths to a greater whole. All ship, and she broadcast, feeling her voice carry through both technology and telepathy. Remember why we fight. Not for conquest or glory, but for the right to dream our own dreams, for the freedom to love who we choose, to create what inspires us to be more than the sum of our programming. The response was immediate, a wave of determination and hope that crashed over the hegemony fleet like a tsunami of pure defiance. The battle that followed would be remembered in the histories of 100 worlds. Ships danced through space in deadly ballet while energy weapons carved lines of fire across the void. Human fighters, small and agile, darted between the massive hegemony vessels like angry wasps, their pilots' courage compensating for their technological disadvantage. But it was Vera herself who turned the tide. Standing in the center of her ship's bridge, she reached out with abilities that combined ancient astral techniques with the mechanical intuition Kai had nurtured in her. She didn't just command her fleet, she became it, feeling every hull breach, every system failure, every moment of triumph and despair. When Vorkesh's flagship targeted the astral dawn with a weapon capable of cracking planets, Vera reached out and turned its own power against it. When enemy boarding parties breached their defenses, she reshaped the ship's corridors into mazes that trapped the invaders in their own ambitions. And when the hegemony admiral, in desperation, attempted to ram his crippled flagship into Earth itself, Vera did something that would echo through galactic history. She caught the massive vessel with her bare hands, her power manifesting as golden chains that held it fast in space. "This is over," she said, her voice carrying across every ship in both fleets. "Surrender now, and you'll be treated with the mercy you've never shown others. Resist and face the consequences of your choices." For a long moment, the void was silent except for the crackle of damaged systems and the whisper of stellar winds. Then, one by one, the hegemony ships powered down their weapons. In the aftermath, as Earth celebrated its unlikely victory and free worlds across the galaxy began to emerge from hiding, Vera found herself once again on the observation deck of her ship. But this time, she wasn't alone with her doubts and fears. Kai stood beside her, his weathered face showing pride that had nothing to do with her cosmic abilities and everything to do with the person she'd become. Jackson was on her other side, his hand intertwined with hers, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of galactic politics that awaited her. "So what now?" Jackson asked. "Empress of the Galaxy has a nice ring to it." Vera laughed, a sound that carried both starlight and the earthy humor of a girl raised in a scrapyard. "Now we build something better. Not an empire, but a commonwealth. A place where every species can contribute their unique gifts without fear of being absorbed or destroyed." "Sounds like a lot of work," Kai observed. "Good thing I learned from the best teacher in the galaxy," she replied, squeezing his arm. "Besides, I've got help." Below them, Earth turned in its ancient orbit, scarred but unbroken. Above them, the stars beckoned with infinite possibility. And around them, the freed peoples of the galaxy began the long work of building something unprecedented, a civilization based not on conquest or conformity, but on the radical idea that diversity was strength. Kestra Vex Allen, born of stars and raised by steel, had finally come home. And home, as it turned out, wasn't a place. It was the people who chose to stand with you, no matter what the galaxy threw at you. The lost heir had risen. Now the real adventure could begin. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.